Okay, so we just hit the 3 o'clock mark. Did we start recording? Is that what she did? Okay. All right. My name is Carrie Mosick. I am one of the instructional designers on campus. I am part of the Division of Extended Learning, as the rest of the presenters from today are. We will go over our introductions in just a moment, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about how this came about. Our department is very diverse, and we all do our own kind of tasks in our department. And through different conversations, like other departments are having, we're talking about AI. And what we found out is there's some really good use of AI being used within the department. And Teresa had the idea of sharing this knowledge with everybody else. And so we kind of went with it. So we asked the department who was available and could talk about different ways they're using AI. And a couple people that couldn't be here today actually shared some thoughts. So we'll share those too with you. So that being said, we should start with introductions. Teresa, do you want to go next?
Hi, and I'm really sorry about the noise. My husband decided to mow the lawn now. Anyway, I'm
You
Teresa
can't hear it.
Gilliard. I'm Teresa Gilliard Cook. I am the Associate Director of Instructional Design in the Division of Extended Learning.
All right, Doug, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Douglas Hemphill. I'm the other instructional designer on campus.
Catherine
Hi, I'm Catherine Watson. I am Associate Director of Professional Development.
and Nicole.
I'm Nicole Stevenson, Contract Training Manager.
Okay, so for this session, we are going to we can start with some general questions that we kind of came up with, but also we're going to be open to letting this conversation go where it goes, because there is some important, things that we could talk about that I've heard and seen for myself. All right, so the first question, let's just start with the most frequent use of AI. What tasks do you use AI for the most, would you say? Anyone from the panel can get started.
Well, one of the things I've been using AI for is as we look at providing opportunities for faculty professional development. So basically for course development for an online course. And to make sure we bring in all the pieces and parts. Thinking about how you construct that prompt, what all the pieces you want in there. One prompt I've used is probably at least a half a page when because you talk about your persona and all of the what it is you're trying to do. If you have different skills you're trying to make sure are incorporated, different aspects of, say, theories or important components that you need to do or need to include, that can be really helpful. So that's one way I've been using it. The other, and I can actually show you really quick. I'll just share my screen really quickly because I have a couple of things I've been doing with it. But it can share. So this is the prompt I started with. What I have here are some of the responses I've gotten. This one was specifically for Gemini. So I really talked about being that I'm looking to bring in a course, build this course, what I wanted to make sure was in there. So that's where I have that all in this middle section. I also outlined the different modules. And then as you can see here, sorry, there's the different components that it gave me in Gemini. I also ran it in ChatGPT. That one is not as fleshed out because I haven't gone back to work on that one. But the one I really liked was from Claude. Claude basically developed the whole thing, gave me the code, HTML code, and everything, which was pretty awesome. Um, so that's one thing I've been doing with it. And the other thing I've been using is Notebook LM. And that's been really helpful because there's been a couple of things that I've used it for specifically for generative AI detection in higher ed. So I brought together some articles and looking at specifically the reliability and implications of AI detectors because we were getting a lot of questions with that. And then the other one I just recently used was um, looking at the value of micro-credentialing and not only here looking at some of the questions you need for different types of assessment, but also then the creation of a visual um, that just showed the different components of what this might look like. So those are just some of the things I'm using it for. But I wanted to be able to share those just so you can see how some of these tools they're really helpful and I think it's helping us pull together pieces that will be beneficial as we work through faculty professional development.
Catherine, would you like to go next?
Sure, I was going to say I can jump in because I can build off that. I also have a micro-credential notebook and Notebook LM. The one that I have is a little bit more focused on people are starting to evaluate the programs they've had out for a couple of years now, since it's a relatively new thing happening in higher ed. So all of the, survey responses, articles, things like that that we get back, I put in a notebook, and then it allows me to kind of search through, run concepts that we're thinking about through there. It's been a helpful way for me to learn. So I have a lot of information to learn very quickly. Um, the other way that I use AI a lot, I work on our division storyline group, which does press releases and social media content for the division. So we will often take a concept or an idea and then I typically use Gemini. Sometimes we use ChatGPT to create or make that content most appropriate for the different platforms. So something for LinkedIn, something for Facebook, something for Instagram in our case. Um, and I think, this isn't groundbreaking or new or anything like that, but I still all the time use AI to help change the tone. So if I'm a little grumpy or if I'm tired and not making a lot of sense, if I want something more formal or less formal, I will put it in Gemini and have it rewrite for me.
All right, what about you, Nicole?
So I use it in a couple of different ways. With my job, working with different outside vendors and people who are looking to work with SUNY Oswego, I've used AI to create templates to look through information and synthesize it for me so I can kind of make sure that I'm hitting all the points I want to use. Also making sure that my material is fully fleshed out. So I'll give ChatGPT a couple of resources and have it read through them and then bolster what I'm looking to put out there or what I'm looking to create an outline about. And that's been really helpful. I've also used it to edit emails and create, some visuals. Hasn't been too successful because I probably haven't been asking it the right questions. But I always make sure that I ask at the end of every prompt, what do you need from me in order to do this? So that, whatever input I can give it so that it'll give me a better answer right off the bat rather than having it go through multiple iterations and then being like, oh yeah, that's not what I wanted and having it backtrack. So I've definitely found that to be beneficial.
All right, and for myself, answering the same question, I think one of the biggest things that I use it for is refining communication. So there's a lot of things that there's a lot of instructions you have to share as far as like bright space support or instructional design support. And clarity of message is very important in our work. And so making sure that what I'm presenting, what I came up with is clear, and definitely use it for adjusting the tone quite a bit. One of the projects I was involved in was helping design the online orientation for our online degree program students, Syracuse campus students. And I wanted to make sure that that was going to reach an audience of everyone, really, whether they're 18, just coming out of high school, or in their 40s and 50s, looking to start over. And so I use that to get my tone correct because I wanted to make sure that I was welcoming on each and every page of that orientation. So that was really helpful. Like, how can I make sure I include this, demographic in what I'm speaking about here? How do I make it so that they don't feel like they're being spoken to like a child? So I would say that's probably my biggest use case of it. But it is funny because I use it all the time. And it's funny because what do you do with it? Well, I do a lot with it. So I actually asked ChatGPT what I used it for, and they told me communication was key. It was my number one. And then it said instructional design, learning objectives with measurable outcomes. That was really great because the measurable part is always difficult to pull together. And sometimes you could spend hours trying to create really good learning outcomes. And yeah, the translating technical information, some of the research and planning, and asking better questions. So I use that quite a bit, even for this when we're trying to come up with the session descriptions, like trying to make sure that it was an engaging title, things like that. I use it quite a bit for idea generation. All right, and Doug.
So personally, I use it for meeting summaries. So I am a chair of one of the campus committees, so I use it to give me summaries of those meetings. And I use it in what I would call a fill in the blank method, similar to what Teresa does, except that I write up an article, for example, first, then I'll have Gemini write up the same article and Cloud write up the same article and look for the holes in what I've presented. Um, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit and pretend to be our ID fellow, Chris Hormelick. Um, he uses AI extensively, and he sent me some notes on how he uses it. So I'm going to go through how he uses it. Um, so he uses it for argument stress testing before things like academic conference presentations. He can put the presentation into an AI and get feedback on what the audience is most likely to push back on so that he can prepare responses to questions in advance. Um, he said it also has helped him to better understand some ambiguous feedback he's gotten from reviewers for publications and things like that. Um, he uses it heavily in personal organization. He uses what's called Obsidian, which is I call it a notebook slash wiki because it allows you to link ideas together and categorize them. And he uses that with Tiago Forte's Para system, which is projects, areas, resources, and archives, where you're trying to sort items by actionability rather than just topic. And the AI helps him reason through where items belong and giving him the reasoning as to why they belong in a particular category rather than just saying, oh, yeah, you should put that here. In concert with that, he uses Rocket Books, which is a reusable notebooks with an app to scan them into a digital format, and he can scan those in using Quen, which is run locally in LM Studio, to make those things that he can copy and paste into Obsidian. Um, he uses it to help him manage tasks. Basically, he can feed in projects to the AI, and it'll give him a list of manageable tasks, help him create task or task managers, and help him create timelines. He uses it for email triage. Using Tiago Forte's One Touch system, it allows you to really effectively go through your email and decide with one touch how you're going to handle each individual email. He uses it in instructional design and course development for developing rubrics, revising assignment instructions for clarity, creating discussion prompts, etc. He's used it for PMP prep. So PMP is a project management preparation course, and he's been able to take materials from that and have the AI create flashcards for him and quizzes to help him be metacognitive on his own learning. And finally, he uses it for professional development reflection. He completed the SUNY-sponsored Coursera AI courses and used them to think more systematically about how AI fits into his personal workflow.
Thank you, Doug, for relaying that information. Um, And then actually, I will say someone else that couldn't be here today. I think one of the really great uses that I have learned about it was responding to the emails more quickly while ensuring that the tone is appropriate, professional, empathetic. Summarizing reports and journal articles for longer documents so that they can identify like what's the main topics there. Um, it was so after a meeting, the part that I'm trying to look through these notes, after a meeting with a student, it helped using the transcript or the summary from the Zoom session. They actually used that to generate the list of to-dos on both their part and also on the student's part. So I thought that was kind of neat. And they're uploading that information into the system. It just saves them all of those notes that they would normally be writing. They're able to streamline that process quite a bit. Let's see, anything else that isn't a repeat? All right, so I think that's it for those questions. Let me just go back up to, or that's it for that question. What's something that surprised you about using AI that you're like, oh, wow, I haven't thought about that before? Something that's, you know, you hadn't considered before. Doug and I had this moment just this about noontime, 1 o'clock, right? One of the other sessions when we were talking about using a CSV file and uploading test banks into Brightspace. That was a nice thing that I hadn't thought of before, hadn't considered it before. Anyone else have any surprises?
I think one of them for me was once I kind of learned how to write a prompt and how to establish, rules for engaging with the chatbot, it definitely like got to know how I would respond. And so I think it was thinking a little bit more about like, oh, how am I going to edit what I'm giving to her based on her prompt? And I think that was really neat. And then over time, if you work in the same chat for a while on like a project that might be ongoing, it definitely like will remember information from previous parts of the chat that you don't have to keep providing so much context, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah, kind of in line with that. As I understand it, the Gemini system that we use does not have persistence because of how our campus system is set up. But you can use what are called gems to set up personalities, and it saves a lot of time in rewriting prompts for identity. Like this is who the lens that I want this answer from. And I think that was also a surprise in working with AI was how good it is at looking at things through different lenses based on the prompts that you give it.
I agree, Doug. That was going to be what I said. I feel like when I first started using AI, it was really obvious when something was written by AI, and it's gotten a lot better. It's gotten a lot easier to use. I feel like I can use it more with fewer edits. And even its ability to just organize information and format information. We have to do a lot of process documents right now in rubrics. And I feel like even 2 years ago, it couldn't make a rubric that was formatted and structured, or at least I couldn't get it to in the way that I wanted it to be. And now it's just piece of cake.
One thing I've recently used it for is right now, I'm chairing a search. And it's the first time I've ever chaired a search. So one of the things too was to be able to do the evaluation of candidates. And that has been made easier because I put the ad into it was Gemini, and it created my rubric, which has been extremely helpful, um, because there's components that help the rest of the search team be able to consider, do the candidates meet these criteria or not? And we're able to utilize that. And that has been extremely helpful for us to at least go through the candidate lists and determine, you know, who comes in for the Zoom interview, who goes to the Zoom interview, and then beyond.
Okay. Let's go on the other side of that. Like, what's something, have you had instances where AI just really doesn't seem to work well for what you're trying to accomplish? Um, if you come across situations where you're just like, I just need to do it myself. I guess one of the things I would say is like with some of the documentation, because it'll throw in Brightspace as a whole instead of SUNY Oswego's Brightspace, which is customized. So sometimes it can be helpful, but our click paths are different. In that case, it does not save me time other than, the clarity piece, but it wouldn't save me time, following those instructions too closely because it's probably going to be incorrect for our campus.
Sometimes I know for me, like when I'm trying to click on links or stuff that it generates as resources, it doesn't take me directly to the page and then I have to go find it. So it takes an extra long period of time when I could have just typed it into Google. So I have found that to be a little bit annoying. And I mean, I don't use it all that often for that purpose, but if when I'm researching, I think I would start with Google first before going to AI for those direct links, at least.
All right. So then also what saved you to the most time? What would you say is something that's really genuinely saved you time um, with your workflow using AI?
I'll
It's
go back to what I said about generating summaries for meetings, not having to go back through notes and type up meeting minutes from scratch. I still always go in and adjust them, which I think is the limitation that there's very little that the AI spits out that I don't do customization and adjustment to. Um, but that and going through data, uh, just dumping in a data set and asking the AI to tell me what the data says is a huge time saver.
I think for me, it's if I'm trying to work through a process or I'm trying to create a process, like a written document or a checklist or something like that, I'm able to put into ChatGPT what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to say. And it will usually generate at least something basic at the beginning. And then as I fine tune it, it'll become, a better product. And it really gives me a good jumping off point, which is really nice.
I think one of the things I found, again, because for quite a while I was just using Gemini, and obviously I've started to branch out. But I think it was Claude that just surprised me so much, especially since it built the course. It gave me all the code, for an eight, all the HTML code and stuff. And I'm like, holy cow, now how do I get this into Brightspace? But I haven't read everything in there. So no, would I do that? No, but it's at least given me a great starting point along with what else I found. But I did not expect Claude to build the whole thing for me. That was a bonus.
I think for me, it's really the building out like a rubric most of the time to be able to say, like, this is the standard, this is the peak, this is the minimum standard that has to be met, and having AI fill in everything in between, and then format it nicely. Again, of course, it's reviewed. The other thing that I think has saved the whole division time is asking, oh, yes, thank you for coming. Asking AI to tell us what we're missing. So I've started doing that at the end of everything, like what's missing from a standard, whatever kind of document. Um, and that's been helpful, I think, in anticipating some questions that we would have gotten down the line.
I think the other thing too is that as the instructional designers are starting to provide some support for with individuals within extended learning who are working on micro credentials like Catherine, and thinking about the types of questions that we need to ask as we're looking at this idea of doing a front end analysis to determine what is it that we're being asked to create or asked to do in working with different clients for micro credentialing. So I think that's been really helpful too, because it's sure it's easy to ask follow-up questions, but where do you start? And to think about how we ask the right questions at the right time. I have found that that's really been helpful. And we have like this question bank that we've built, but of course not all the questions are going to be appropriate, but it gives us a starting point. And I think that's been really helpful as we think about how we can walk through and making sure that what is needed for building a specific micro credential, we have all the pieces and parts. And it's the same principles with course development as well.
And I would just say something about, so, throughout the day, everybody can relate to this. Monday morning, you come in nice and fresh, but by Thursday afternoon, Friday, you're done. So use of AI increases throughout the week because I have to reply, have to respond something or other, but the cognitive load component, like just taking some of that away for things that are relatively routine. It's using it wisely, but there are times when you have to write the perfect email and it has to be, it has to be perfect. And so using AI to help streamline that process for you so that you can get back to other work besides an email. That would, I think that's a great use of it, that saves time for sure. At least for me, especially towards the end of the week. I really do feel that way too. Okay. Let's see. If someone were just starting out with AI, what direction would what direction would you tell them to go as far as using AI in their work?
I would
I think
go ahead, Doug.
um I think the lowest hanging fruit is to use it to review your own work and for brainstorming. I think some of the stuff that like Chris does with the Obsidian Para stuff and the email triage takes a little bit higher level of comfort with the AI system. Uh, so yeah.
I That's kind of what I was going to say as far as start with brainstorming, have it come up with ideas, and then, you can take it a step further and take that idea and present it to ChatGPT and just, or any kind of AI, and see how it would respond to that. Because once you start seeing their responses, you're able to analyze it a little bit more, able to kind of make changes and nuance your own prompt so that it's better for what you need it to be.
Someone on campus told me that everyone is an expert once they've started using AI because like you gotta play around with it and just use it and learn it. And that's really the only way to learn it. Like you're not gonna break anything. Maybe don't give it your bank account number and your social security number. As long as you don't do those things, will be good. But using it is really the best training tool. So for me, I think I started using it more professionally once I used it personally. Like I was having it meal plan and make grocery lists and like try to organize my personal life, which is awesome. And it did very well with it. Um, and after thinking, it was like, oh, well, if it can know, what I have in my fridge and what I need to use and come up with recipes and a shopping list based on that, it could also probably help organize my inbox or my to-do list. It could help organize my professional life as well. Um,
That's really funny that you said that because I used it this weekend. I had 5 gallon and 10 gallon buckets to plant vegetables in, and I asked it which vegetables of my 6 types that I planted would do best in the 5 gallon buckets and which one would do best in the 10 gallon. And it actually like told me exactly what to do. I'm like, where have you been my whole life? Like, and something like that, I trust, like I'm sure it's fine, but even just doing the research to figure that out, like I would have to look up each individual vegetable and find out where they would be most successful to determine the best way to go about this. And in just a moment, it took my planning time down to a minute as I was able to get that task done. Um, so that was one use this weekend on a personal level that I very much appreciated. Um, I've seen a lot about like using it for policies, things like that, like in the syllabus, something like that. Being able to look for your weaknesses, things that you may have forgotten. Rebecca had a session earlier today where she was talking about everything's, for mainstream, like this audience here, but adding the personalities of like this example that she gave was for travel, people that are really nervous about traveling, people that have traveled a lot, like everybody's going to travel together. So how can you get your prompt to meet everybody's needs? And thinking about and a lot of different correspondence that we do on campus, whether it's for students or whether for staff or faculty, everybody, we have brand new faculty to seasoned faculty. We have, students that transferred in that already know a lot about college campuses, just need to know for Oswego. So using that type of information to generate, some of our content, or at least check our content to make sure that we met all of those personality types, I think is really beneficial and helpful. Good use of it. And I will say that pretty much never. Going with the first prompt that generates, that's not realistic at all. But and I very rarely uh, use it word for word of any sort. Like it's more of a really good generating of an idea, because they never speak how I'm going to speak. um, no one does, as we joke about. But that's it is still really helpful just to kind of go through the different ways, to help you catch some things that might have been missed if you relied just on what you're exposed to. Example, I don't interact with students, but sometimes we need to, support students as, even if whether it's bright space support or whatever it might be. So it helps get your head into that lens, uh, to come up with a quality product outcome. Does anybody use it for, like, for for different sources of information? Like, are you using it for research purposes, where you are concerned about the reliability of the sources?
I have done some when I've been looking for resources, because we've been working on creating some curriculum for micro credentials in a couple of spaces, looking at what they've actually given me as, hey, this is a source, and then you go to the source and it doesn't necessarily have that information and it hallucinates, that it said that can be a little bit intimidating at first, because you're like, well, it said it's there, and then you have to go back and actually, look at the information and make sure that it's there. I have found it helpful, though, in that space to really just compile a list of resources or places I could start looking, so I can kind of start at least, doing my own research and then looking at ChatGPT to give me, just some more ideas. So I feel a little bit more complete across the board rather than the one avenue that I would look in.
Okay, does anyone have any final thoughts on, anything that we've covered? Does anyone in the audience have any questions about anything that we've talked about you'd like to know more about? Okay. Go ahead, Teresa.
So one of the things that I've been looking into too, and I'm sure most people will know this, is that looking for the right tool for the right purpose. So for one thing, talking about, for example, Nicole, what you were just talking about, finding resources, um, looking at all of the different tools there are, perplexity could really be a tool that could help for you looking for those appropriate resources. So it's one of those things, as I've been looking more and more into this and thinking about how I can really integrate things into potential workflows, and things like that, is just looking for the right tool to do the right job, because not every tool will work for what you're trying to accomplish. Um, and as you also mentioned, Nicole, we know AI hallucinates. So it's really finding those tools that you can do. But sometimes that's where, using things, for example, what I've done when I've been using Notebook LM is I will go to like Google Scholar or a couple of other resources and find the some of the current articles that, based on the abstract, may be helpful to what I'm looking for. And that's when I'll pop them into Notebook LM with maybe a question or some suggestion on how they can pull all this together because of what I'm looking for. So that's just one thing I have found really helpful, is just making sure I'm using the right tool for the right job.
Okay, that kind of covers what I was looking to cover. If anyone has anything more to add, great. If not, then that's where we're at. All right. Well, I thank the panelists for coming today and for the couple that did get us some information. I hope that I know it was just, conversation about ideas, but maybe you wrote down a few things that could be beneficial in your space. Easy ways to start using AI to help improve productivity in your work environment. So that is all.
Thank you for hosting, Carrie.
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Karen.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.